Hey everyone, this is Vince. Today I want to look at the book When Bad Things Happen to Good People by Rabbi Harold Kushner. This is actually going to be a much different video than the one I originally planned. Since this is a book about pain and suffering, I was at first thinking about making a video to try and help people who might have had tragedy happen in their lives and might be searching the internet for answers or for comfort. However, I realized as I was making that video that the best advice I can give to a person going through something like this is to go straight to the source. In my description of this video, I put a link to a talk given by Harold Kushner on this book that I think you should watch. Obviously, I would also recommend this book, and I recommend other books on suffering that people who have gone through things like losing family members or being diagnosed with an incurable disease. Books that these people have recommended to me, so I list those in my description also, and you're welcome to go there. You're also welcome to email me if you need someone to talk to, but that's not the video that I ended up making. On my channel, I try to present ideas or summaries of books that I think everyone should know about. If that's something that interests you or you'd like content like this, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. So I'm going to do the same thing for this book, like I do for every book, and that is I'm going to give you a pretty good summary of what it says and why I think it's important that you should know about it. Usually when I give a summary of a book, I make two videos. One is a short video just to give the gist of the book for those who might be interested. And then I do a longer video, which is more in depth. And so this is that longer video. So let's get started. This book was born out of pain. Rabbi Kushner's son Aaron was diagnosed with a disease called progeria at the age of 3. Progeria is a rapid aging disease, and it led to Aaron's death at the age of 14, something that they all knew was going to happen. Now, Rabbi Kushner, unlike many of us who might experience news like this of a dying loved one or about ourselves, unlike us, he was cursed at having gone to seminary and studied things like suffering and loss, and having been a rabbi for so many years, going to people's houses and performing funerals and such. Talking to people and trying to comfort them going through similar suffering that he was going through. Now, you might think that'd be a blessing for him, like he knows all the answers. He doesn't have to watch a video like this. He knows why this is happening. But as it turns out, all of the training that he had was a curse for him because, as he discovered, as more and more friends came to talk to him and give him the same answers and bits of advice that he used to give, he found that they were not comforting in the slightest. In fact, much of what they said made him either upset at God or upset at himself. Kushner says that he knew from early on that he was going to end up writing a book about this. He even told his son Aaron before he died that he was going to do it. He wanted to be able to help people who were going through similar things. But he says he ended up writing a very different book from the one that he envisioned. So this is not a theology book or even an academic book. This is a book written by a person who lost his son, talking about how he started to understand pain and suffering and God, and now he's writing a book that he wants to help others. So what does he say, or why do I think this is a book you should know about? Well, the first answer is obvious, and that is it's just a really good self-help book. If you're going through a situation like this, or if you know someone who's going through a situation like this, so that you might know what to say to that person, this is a really good place to start. The second answer, on a more objective or academic level, I think it's a great book because of how he deals with the problem of suffering. The problem of suffering is also called theodicy, by the way. So the problem of theodicy or suffering goes something like this. If God is all powerful and God is all good or all loving or all just, then why is it that God allows bad things to happen? Or you might think, why is it that bad things happen to good people or good things happen to bad people? Like, shouldn't God at least be just and punish the bad people for doing bad and reward the good people for doing good? Well, let's explore Kushner's answer to this problem. Kushner uses the book of Job as a springboard for his discussion. If you've ever read any of Kushner's books, this is pretty typical. He uses a particular book from the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Old Testament as a springboard for his discussion. And Job is a good one to use because It's about suffering. Just a little history on the book of Job for those of you who care for clarification. The book of Job is very old, and it seems to have gone through at least two authors, probably three. The first author wrote a very long poem about suffering, and specifically about the suffering of a man named Job. The second author seems to have come along and added a narrative to that story, so that they put the poem in context. They bookmarked it, and it's on both ends. Like, it's a story of Satan making a deal with God, and God letting Satan do all these terrible things to Job, and Job doesn't relent. And then the story ends with Job getting healthy again and getting a brand new family. Kushner in this book is not going to deal with that second author, the one who suggests that human suffering happens because of a cosmic game, or because God lets the devil torture us. And then in the end, if we just remain faithful to God, then God makes up for killing all the people closest to us by giving us more people to fill up that empty space. No doubt Kushner would find this very unsatisfactory, and no doubt you do as well. Kushner is going to deal with the middle part, that poem, the first author who's seeking to understand why bad things happen. If you don't know the story of Job, it goes something like this. Job is a righteous person. He is a person who, for all intents and purposes, is a good person. He undergoes tragedy. If you're not particularly tied to the Bible or don't care anything about biblical stories, this is not a difficult situation to imagine. Like, just think of a good person who loses someone close to them, or everyone close to them. Like, that's what Job is about. Job is then visited by his friends. They try to comfort him. They tell him that he's suffering because of something that he did. Job says, no, I didn't do anything wrong. Job says, God is the one who did something wrong. God is not a fair God. And so he challenges God. If you are fair, he says, come show me what I've done wrong. And lo and behold, God does appear. And you might think that God's going to then, answer Job and tell him all the things he's done wrong. But instead, God gives an answer that's not really easily understood. He seems to say something like, who are you to demand anything of me? Okay, so in that, we have three answers to the questions of suffering. And Kushner is going to explore each of these. Number one, you are at fault. When bad things happen, it's because you did something wrong. The second is God is at fault. When bad things happen, it's because God is not fair and just. And the third is this answer given by God, and we might think the answer given by the person who wrote the poem. And it's ultimately how that person understands suffering, and ultimately how Kushner understands it also. And that's found in God's answer. And that's going to take a little unpacking. So first, let's deal with the first two, and we can talk about why they're unsatisfactory. Kushner says when you read the book of Job, you want to believe three things. First, Job is a good person. Second, God is fair and righteous. And third, God is all-powerful. That's not new to Kushner. That's just the problem of theodicy, right? Kushner says that there is no problem of theodicy as long as Job is doing okay. But once he starts to suffer, it's not so easy. In fact, for suffering to make sense, you have to deny one of those things. You cannot believe all of them to be true. So he says, the friends get rid of the first one. Yes, God is all-powerful. Yes, God is good and just. So therefore, Job, you must be the one who did something wrong. Job seeks to get rid of the second claim. He says, no, I'm a good person, and we can all admit that God is all-powerful, so God must not be a just God. Kushner believes that in God's answer, we see that God, and again the author of Job, take the third option. God shows up in this whirlwind, and he says, Job, you are so small. Do you have any idea what it's like to run the universe? Who are you to question me? A traditional reading of this is, you don't get to question me. My ways are so great, you can't even comprehend them. Kushner, however, sees here God saying, you think it's so easy? You do it. This universe stuff is a lot harder than it looks, and I'm not so sure that I'm up to the task. So what he sees in God's answer is an elimination of that third supposition above. Yes, Job is correct. He is good. He is without blame. Yes, I am a fair and righteous God. I love everyone, and I only want what's best for you. However, I'm not all powerful. I just can't do it all. And this, to me, is the real genius of this book and of Kushner. Kushner says that we're so scared of even looking at that option, that maybe God's not all powerful, that we think of a bunch of excuses for suffering in order to protect God. We're afraid to lose our own worldview. We want to believe in an all-powerful, good God. We want a God who we can pray to, that helps us as we're going in for surgery, and that protects our family from the hurricane. So when something bad happens to someone that we know, we immediately try to reconcile that with our beliefs. Kushner says that he has found that most of the things that people say trying to explain suffering is really meant to comfort the comforter and not comfort the one who is suffering. And what he means by that is that we try to keep our own worldview intact, and so therefore we must protect God. So for instance, we blame the victim. We say things like, well, the girl who was raped must have been wearing something provocative. Sometimes we say things like, well, God knows what God is doing, or it was just her time to go, or his time to go, or all those 125 people on the airplane's time to go. So we say those things so that we can protect God and keep God from scrutiny. Listen, I don't know what the answer is, but I know God is good and God is all powerful. And so I pray to God to help things go really well with me during my surgery. When in reality, what Kushner says is we need to consider that God just may not be able to stop the bad things from happening. By the way, this is a good place to mention what a friend of mine said to me when he lost his daughter in a car wreck. He actually read Kushner's book, and he was trying to deal with his loss. And so I'm not sure if Kushner helped him reach this conclusion or not, but he said, I used to pray and pray and pray that God would just this once, change the laws of physics, go back in time and put me in her place. Nobody would know. Like, just do it one time. It'll be our little secret. But he said it occurred to him that would be unfair. See, we often talk about how it's unfair if God lets bad things happen, but actually, it's completely fair. If God is all-powerful and God chooses to let people die, some people die and some people live, or some to lose family members and others to go back in time and change place with their daughter in a car, that would be a God who is unfair. That would be a God who is unloving to most and only cares for some. So, if you have a problem thinking of a God who's not all-powerful, like in Kushner's conclusion, you might think of a God who can interfere, but does not because of God's great sense of love. Anyway, I don't know if that helps or not, but there it is for what it's worth. Okay, Kushner does not put it the way I'm about to put it. But what I think is very interesting is that he kind of sets up a God of necessity. And by that I mean, if you're the kind of person who does not believe in God for the very reason that there is pain and suffering in the world, and you reason, what good is an all-powerful God if he can't get rid of suffering? Kushner would agree with you. Why even talk about such a God? Now, if we were to pick either one of the first two answers, then either we have a God who is constantly watching, ready to pounce on anything we do wrong, and so we're constantly being scared of God, or being scared that we're not good enough, or we have a God who is not loving and not fair, and who just punishes people on a whim. So in either one of those two cases, if such a God exists, why would we want to worship that God? What good is that God to a person who is suffering? By the way, this is a very similar argument to that is used in liberation and minority theology by James Cone. James Cone, in A Black Theology of Liberation, which I summarize on my channel, he gives an explanation of why oppressed people would even believe in God. And he says that God must be on the side of the oppressed. Why? Because if God was on the side of the oppressors, which you are either on the side of the oppressed or you're on the side of the oppressors, right? You're either helping one or you're just helping the other. But if God is on the side of the oppressors, then why would we worship that God? And so if we're going to believe in God, we must believe that God is actively working to liberate oppressed people. So Kushner does not say that, but he does, maybe inadvertently, set it up that way. There is no reason to care about a God that is all-powerful and just plays games with us by making us suffer. Rather, for those who understand suffering, for those who have been through it before, if we're going to find comfort in God at all, we have to take option 3 and believe that God is not powerful enough to keep us from suffering, but instead suffers with us. Does that mean that Kushner only believes in God out of necessity? No, Kushner believes in God and thinks that it's very evident there's a God. He says that he sees God in how people find strength in God after they suffer. He often says, I believe in miracles, but not in small miracles like the parting of the Red Sea. I believe in giant miracles like God changing someone's life. For instance, he says, what else could it be that gives people the courage to keep on going, or to find strength to deal with their pain, or to find ways to bring meaning to their suffering? He says he finds God in the resiliency of the human spirit, so that's where God is. Okay, so the answer to why bad things happen to good people, in Kushner's opinion, is that it's just nature. Storms happen, genetics go wrong, people use their own free will to kill or rape others. The next question, why doesn't God stop this? Kushner's answer, because God's not able to. The next question, where is God when this happens? Kushner's answer is, God is with the one suffering. God gives the one suffering strength and courage. God builds the suffering person up. God loves them and gives them the ability to love others. And so this is why the name of the book is not why bad things happen to good people, but when bad things happen to good people. Because he says the bad things are going to happen. We can't stop them, and neither can God. What matters is what we do and what God does after those bad things happen. I want to give a few things that he says we need to start seeing differently, and we're now able to see them differently once we stop trying to defend God and we understand suffering for what it really is. One of those things is meaning in suffering. Some people say, well, there's meaning to your suffering. God makes you suffer for a reason. Kushner says, again, that's nothing but us trying to defend God. Suffering doesn't have a meaning. Suffering just happens. There's not a reason. But when bad things do happen, we can make our suffering mean something. For instance, people would tell him, maybe God took your son from you so that you could write this book to help others. Kushner completely rejects that claim, but instead says that while God did not kill his son, he can certainly make the death of his son more meaningful in a way that it would not have been meaningful if he had not written a book that helped millions of other people going through something similar. In fact, he says one of the biggest ways to deal with suffering is to make your suffering mean something. In this, by the way, he agrees with Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, another book that I summarize on my channel. Frankl was a Holocaust survivor who said that the people who were best able to survive the horrors of the Holocaust were the ones who were able to find meaning in their suffering. Kushner and Frankl worded it a little differently, but I think they're both getting at essentially the same thing, and that is that suffering can best be endured if you are able to bring meaning out of it. What Kushner is rejecting is that suffering means something in and of itself, and he's saying it doesn't. He's saying we can turn it into something that some sort of meaning. Another thing he says that we can understand better once we understand the role of God and the role of suffering is prayer. Prayer is not a supplication asking God to heal us or to make a situation better. There's no magic formula that if we just say the right words or we say them enough, or if we have enough people praying for us, that everything will be better. Instead, prayer is a way that we ask God to give us strength to overcome our suffering, or to live through it, or to find ways to make it meaningful. And finally, one of the most useful things about this book, in my opinion, and one that I wish that everyone could take to heart, Kushner talks about how to deal with a friend or a family member who is suffering. He says that the two things that Job's friends got right was that they came and sat with Job and they listened to Job. If you have someone in your life who is suffering, who's undergone tragedy, you first need to not be scared to go talk to them. Most of us are. As a pastor, I'll tell you that one of the hardest parts of my job is to not to go talk to people, but to get other people to go talk to people. Because they always say the same thing. I just don't know what to say. What would I even say to them? Well, first, you don't need to feel uncomfortable. They just lost a son, not you. They certainly are not concentrating on how awkward you might be or how awkward you might feel. What do you say to them? Tell them you're sorry, and then just sit there. One of the first things you learn as a hospital chaplain or as a pastor when learning how to comfort people or being with people through tragedy is just the ministry of presence. Just being there for people, letting them know that you are thinking about them or being there so they can talk. That's enough. And the second thing that Job's friends did right was they listened. Job's friends listened, and so should you. Tell them you're sorry, and then just shut up. All right, listen to them. And when they ask, why is this happening to me? They're not really asking a question. They aren't looking for you to say one of the many things that I listed above about why they might be suffering. They're not asking for your personal theology. They're crying out for comfort. And you comfort them just by listening. When we speak, unless we truly understand their pain, unless we've been there before, we're most likely going to say something stupid that will hurt them even more. So just sit and listen. Okay, that's my summary of Kushner's book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. If you're interested in this topic, I would recommend another book to you, and this is from a Christian perspective, or from the perspective of God and Jesus dying on the cross. And that book is called The Crucified God by Jürgen Moltmann, which I summarize on this channel. It's very dense. It's this one. It's very dense, and it's a very complicated book. So while I can't really recommend that you read it, I mean, you're welcome to if you want to, I do recommend that you watch the video where I summarize it. Again, if you like the summary and would like to hear more about ideas or books you should know about, subscribe to my channel.